We are roughly 24 hours away from the 2024 NFL Draft. So tonight we're going to cover draft rumors, a final mock, and I really mean it this time, the Jets' top 30 visits. I'm Glenn Norton with JetNation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log on to JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. Myself and Chris Schubert will take you through tonight. Chris, after last week's show, I messaged you and Dylan almost immediately and said we didn't do the top 30.
The
It was in the show title.
Yep.
I teased it at the beginning,
Yep.
and when we went off the air, I was like, man, that's showing a lot quicker than I expected. I feel like we missed something, and then I thought, we missed the 30 players we were going to discuss.
Yeah, it was a tough look for all of us because it's not like you just come up with the show concepts and we go. We have a
Yeah.
conversation beforehand of what we want to talk about, and this was one of the things that you had mentioned to both Dylan and myself of like, hey, let's go through these top 30
Yeah.
visits. We can break them all down. We're like, yeah, great, no problem. And listen, it's draft
I
season.
even-
You can just
I-
get distracted very easily.
I didn't go back and watch it. I almost wanted to, because I feel like when I was wrapping up, I feel like I dragged it out. Like you could tell I knew something. I was like, all right then. And I was looking at the time, it said 46 minutes. I'm like, how did we not hit an hour? I'm like, all right, I guess that's it. And then logged off and went, oh yeah, there was that thing we were going to do. So we'll do that. We'll talk about some draft rumors. Not many at the moment. I know the rumors will be hot and heavy as the draft gets closer. As Bill Belichick said the other day, I don't know if you saw him on McAfee. You know, you don't pay attention to much of what's out there until you're about 12 hours out. One thing I did see today, Chris, that caught my interest only because I've said a few times in this draft, the only guy that I would trade up for from the Jets, and I mean trade up like to 4 to 5, where it's going to cost something, would be Marvin Harrison Jr. I know Daniel Jeremiah did that a couple weeks ago on a mock where he was just kind of messing around, having some fun. I saw a tweet today from Bleacher Report. I couldn't click it because I was busy, but it said there was an ESPN report claiming the Jets were looking to move up to grab a wide receiver. So I automatically think, you're going to go get him? You're going to go get more? They don't have the ammo to get up to 4, and that's what it would take. So I don't see that happening. And also worth noting, as I said the other day, so often these rumors are completely made up out of thin air and based on nothing. But it doesn't mean it's not a possibility. I still think, and I could be wrong, I believe the Jets' number one preference would be to move down and add a second rounder. If you can get a team that's somewhere between 15 and 20 that really loves somebody at 10, maybe that'll happen. But what are your thoughts there? Do you think it's realistic this team can move up? If so, how high?
Yeah, let's try to take this one chunk at a time because I think there's a lot of different layers to where the Jets currently sit at number 10. I think trading up is, I don't want to use the term impossible because anything is possible if you open up the idea of trading future, draft capital in 2025 and 2026 and utilize all of the resources at your disposal. But the New York Jets are dealing from a draft capital deficit, which is not normal under Joe Douglas. And so entering this draft, I just think getting beyond maybe 2 or 3 picks in front of where they are. So you're talking 7 right now where Tennessee sits, Atlanta at 8, Chicago at 9, those 3 picks. Anything beyond that, I just don't know if the Jets have that arsenal because, Glenn, while yes, if you love a guy, go get your guy. This team has other things I think they'd like to address over the course of the 3 days. And if you told me they had to move their 1 and their 3 to move up and then not pick it all on day 2, I would have a tough time with that. I really would, because I think there are other things this team needs to address. So the idea of moving up, I think, is really far-fetched unless it's up 1 or 2 spots. You can just pick swap, add in one of those additional day 3 picks that they have, and then you can find a way to make that work. That makes some sense to me. Now, when it comes to trading down, you need a dance partner. And to me, let's pair a couple of the rumors that are out there together. Apparently, teams are falling over themselves to try to move up to get one of these tackles. Like, they're apparently falling over each other. Well, if you're the New York Jets, this is kind of what we talked about when they made all those moves for the offensive linemen. They don't have to take a lineman. They might want to. They might really like a guy. But let's say they only really like Joe Alt, and Joe Alt goes inside the top 5. Well, now, if there's a team that really likes Olu Fashanu, or really likes Talise Fuaga, or really likes the kid out of Washington, or really likes JC Latham, or likes any of those guys, and they want to move up. New Orleans Saints are a team at 14 that I think absolutely would want to get in front of the Raiders potentially and move up a couple of spots to take a tackle. Maybe that's where you swing a second round pick. You only move down 4 spots. You can still get an impact player inside the top 15, but you also give yourself a additional ammunition on day 2 to have a second round and a third round pick. I just, it's weird because I've been doing my mock drafts because I think we are all going to do one and keep track of it in real time tomorrow night during our live draft extravaganza that we are doing. And I'm having a really tough time figuring out what the Jets are going to do. And I'll tell you what, Glenn, I'm having a really tough time figuring out anything outside like the first 3 picks. Like it's really hard because you move one player, you take Joe Alt and you, instead of putting him at 5, you put him at like 8. Like it throws the whole thing off.
Changes
And
everything.
like it's just it. I've spent a lot of time agonizing over this, and I have 2 versions done. I like neither of them. We are, less than 20 or 24 and a half hours away from the draft starting. It's a lot of moving parts, a lot of noise. The one thing I will say to everybody, you're going to hear noise tomorrow. Let's be careful, okay? It's smokescreen season times 100
Yeah.
on the day of the draft. So let's be careful with what we're seeing. Let's put everything in the right context and just know Joe Douglas and company probably have a pretty good idea of what they want to do at number 10 going into tomorrow night.
Yep. And how we doing, Wild Wave in the chat as
Up
usual?
Wild Wave.
Thanks for checking in. Yeah, Rich Samini said it earlier. The draft is never easy to predict beyond the first few picks. There might be a few sort of easy picks along the way where a guy's just such a good fit. But this year does seem a little tougher to project, and there's a few different reasons for it, right? We've talked about it. I try not to get caught up in a GM's tendencies as it is. Unless a GM has been in place for 10, 12 years. Like, oh, look, Joe Douglas likes to do this and he likes to do that. He's had a handful of drafts. Every draft is so much different.
Mm-hmm.
He can only do what the board allows him to do. Oh, he likes this position. Maybe he didn't want that position, but it was the one that fell to him, so that's what he went with. You know what I mean? Like the tendencies are so difficult to project, but when you look at the big thing to me, I keep trying to get my head around the idea of alignment. I understand when people say I want to tackle. I understand why. It's not like I don't think it makes sense just from a pure football perspective. But to me, it doesn't make sense from a Jets perspective because of everything being they brought everybody in on a 1-year deal, and then they're going to go long term in the draft, like guy who might not play. That doesn't make sense to me. But I get it, and the fact that Joe Douglas loves his own linemen, and the fact that Joe Douglas showed us just last year, I will draft a guy who might not play in the top 10, top 12, whatever. I don't want him to do it. I'm just trying to get myself mentally prepared for that to happen in case it does. I don't think it will. I still think it's going to be somebody who helps Aaron Rodgers on day 1 in the form of somebody who catches footballs. Um, whether it's Bowers or Dunze, if somebody else falls, doesn't really matter. Of course, yes, of course, I favor Bowers, but I just want a legitimate pass catcher added to this offense. I think that's what Joe Douglas is going to do. But as Rich Samini said it earlier, Rich Samini said, having a really hard time sort of predicting what the Jets are going to do here. And as ever, you listen to any former scout, former GM, anybody who's been inside a war room, we have no idea what draft board. There could be 5 guys that you think are slam dunk, no brainer picks to the Jets, and they may, for some reason, not have any of those guys on their board. They may have found something in a background check, a character concern, something we don't know about. So maybe there's a guy, maybe the tackle, maybe they love Joe Alt, and then they like another guy who may go before 10, and the next guy they love is Rosengarten, who's a sort of back of the first round, top of the second, wherever. Some mocks have him in the third round. I don't see him last until the third round. But and I try to remind myself of that during the draft because the number of times you see a guy fall and you're ripping your hair out thinking, why aren't they taking this guy in this round? And there could just be something there. But the Jets, it's going to be very tough to predict. But that was the big, rumor, I guess. Again, it was reportedly from ESPN saying that the Jets are trying to trade up to take a receiver. If it's a receiver, I can't see them. Again, they're not going to have the ammo to move up and get Marvin Harrison. I don't know that they'd have the ammo to move up to get Neighbors. And I think Odunze makes sense. I'm kind of at this point. I think it's either trade down or it's Bowers or Odunze. We'll see what happens there. The rumor you mentioned, Chris, Daniel Jeremiah tweeting, everybody wants to move up and get a tackle. Here's a thought I had earlier, Chris, and I pitched this to you and Dylan a couple weeks ago, but that was just sort of an off the cuff. What if they did this? But thinking about it more today, I have a hard time believing, like, people are talking about the Broncos and Raiders. They need a quarterback where they go up to 10 to get one. I think if either of those teams wants a quarterback that's falling, they're going to go over the Jets. They're going to trade up to 7, 8, 9, because they can't trade up to 10 and risk getting jumped by someone else unless they wait till the moment that guy's on the board. But are they going to do that? I think the Jets get jumped before that happens. I think if the Jets want to trade down, it's going to have to be something like the Chiefs at 32 or a team in the mid 20s, late 30s saying, we want to tackle and we're going to give you 3 picks in the top 100. And with pick 72, you're now going to have 4 choices in the top 100 instead of 2. And maybe the Jets consider that. I think if it's a trade down, it's a big one. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they can move down to 14. Again, the Colts are the sort of the X factor because there's rumors they want Bowers. And if they feel like they can move, I mean, they may feel like they have to jump the Jets to get him, but if they feel like they can swap with the Jets and get him at 10, I'm all for that. But I think a trade down could be a big one. But I think if they stay put, it's a Dunze or Bowers.
Yeah, and this is the rabbit hole that I go down here. And just so you know, I'm looking at my phone, it's because I have my mock draft up here and I'm just
Yep.
taking in what you're saying from an information perspective. And I'm saying, does that line up with what I was thinking earlier today? And one of the things that has been consistent for me every time I've done a mock draft is I'm not giving Brock Bowers to the Jets. And that means he gets to Indy constantly. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's just never an option for another team. And so whether or not they trade up for him or not, I just have decided with Brock Bowers, I'm putting him to Indy. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Like that's a decision
Right.
I've just made with Brock Bowers. When it comes to the trade down scenario, here is the rabbit hole that I go down and I talk myself into circles. Because if a team is going to trade up to where the New York Jets are picking, other than the quarterback situation, which again, I just don't see one of the big 3, Caleb, Jaden Daniels, Drake May falling. We're talking JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix at that point, probably. Like those are the 2 guys. Michael Penix Jr. is not going. I do not think he's going in the first round. I know there's a lot of like late buzz about this. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
there. Other than the quarterback, you're trading up to get a wide receiver or you're trading up to get a tackle. The problem with that is that coincides with 2 things that I think the Jets would love to stay and pick at 10. So you're walking this tightrope of the players that the Jets like at the top of the board at those positions go, but the players that are still left are liked a lot by the teams behind them that want to move up. And to me, when you are going that granular, when you are that walking the tightrope on a trade back scenario, it's what makes it really hard to believe. Because Glenn, if Rome Odunze is there at 10, the Jets I don't think are entertaining calls and trading down. I think they're taking Rome Odunze at 10. I think if Joe Alt makes it somehow to 10, I don't think the Jets are entertaining calls. I think they're taking Joe Alt to 10. And so to me, like it would mean that like a team really loves Brian Thomas Jr. and the Jets don't, and that team wants to hop all the way up to get Brian Thomas Jr. Or it's the Jets don't really love Olu Fashanu, but a team really wants to move up for Olu Fashanu.
Right.
Like those are very, very specific scenarios in which a trade down would occur. So when I'm putting together a predictive mock, I try to go big picture. I try to not go very, very specific, thin examples on which this could potentially play out to where the Jets trade down. And so it just feels like out of all the outcomes, I feel like, Doctor Strange in Avengers Endgame. I've seen all the different timelines. I just, more often than not, I see the Jets staying at 10 and picking there than I do any other potential scenario.
Yeah, and again, that could happen. I think you can't rule it out. A few months ago, I thought there's no way. I thought Joe Douglas has to get that second rounder back. I think he would love to get that second rounder back. But if the guy they like is there at 10, and the other part of it is that we've talked about this before. I think there are backup caliber left tackles on the market that they could sign after the draft. It's always possible, and I've said this on a few shows, that they could have something worked out with somebody already.
Sure.
It could be Donovan Smith or David Bakhtiari or Charles Leno. Any of those guys, they can have something already in place to where left tackle isn't as big of a need as we're assuming it is. And the other part of that, Chris, actually, and I wanted to bring this up today. this was a good time to bring it up because of the numbers. I don't know if you saw the deal Penei Sewell got with the
Mhm.
Lions. He got something along the lines of $800 billion for 4 years. Congratulations to him. But the first thing I thought was that guy as a stud tackle, who everyone knew was going to be a stud tackle, he really struggled for his first 6, 7, 8 NFL games. And I said one of the things I've been saying, especially recently, I understand any player can bust, but if Bowers or Odunze bust, you can still have a good functional scoring offense. If you're telling me we must draft a tackle because Tyron Smith will get hurt and that guy will start, I'm like, can you get by with a tackle who's not very good for half a season? Who's given up, 4, 5, 6 sacks and 25, 30 pressures? Is that okay? Because the whole idea behind we gotta take and people do it on both sides. Everyone assumes their guy is going to hit the ground running and not need any time. That's not reality. Almost every guy will need some time. And I feel like the impact of a guy either having a bad full season or a bad first half season, the impact of a Dunze struggling for a half a year, you've still got Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, possibly Alan Lazard. You've got Conklin. You've got weapons that you can still, if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, you're still going to put points on the board. But if that left tackle stinks for 6, 7, 8, 9 games, that could change the whole dynamic. So Sewell, to me, I saw that contract and I thought probably a good time to mention that because everyone's talking about him like he's the player he is, as they should be. But people are ignoring the fact that for his first half season, he wasn't very good. And we have a lot of people assuming that no matter which tackle they take, that guy's going to be Penei Sewell on day one. And the chances of that are very, very unlikely.
I think an interesting way to spin what you just talked about is overall front office philosophy, right? Because I think, and I think you would think this as well, that this front office thinks they're going to be pretty competitive this year, right? That barring
Absolutely.
something
They
catastrophic,
better be.
they're going to be a 9-10 win team and be in the playoffs. That's what they think. I'm not discussing what we think and doing a
Mhm.
schedule. What they think in that building is they feel that they have, with Aaron Rodgers healthy and the investments into the offensive line, the investments with Mike Williams, that they have put together a team that's going to be extremely competitive. So if you're Joe Douglas and that's what you think, and we think that he thinks that, then you are kind of, and I'm using this expression a lot tonight, you're walking a tightrope because if you're going to be as competitive as you think that you are, then you're probably going to be back for 2025. And so if you are, you can potentially take this 2024 draft and take a tackle and not need that person to play this year. But if you think you need a little bit extra to get you over the top in 2024, then you need to take a player that's ready right now because you're all in. So it's weird because they are all in, but because they have gone all in, they could convince themselves that they're going to be competitive enough to where they can make a pick for 2025. So it's this weird blender that you can put yourself in mentally on what they think, because this is an extremely unique scenario that they find themselves in for 2024. And Glenn, I just keep falling back on this idea of this is a team, and I saw the tweet from Warren Sharp the other day about it, and I quote tweeted it, and I said, I think everyone knows what I'm going to say about this. And it was a tweet that showed the investments that teams have made in the draft using draft capital over the last 5 years. So 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023 into offensive linemen.
Mhm.
The New York Jets have invested the second most draft capital over that 5-year time span into offensive linemen. The only team that has spent more draft capital on offensive linemen than the New York Jets is a team they share a building with, the team across the hall, the New York Giants. So with that in the back of my mind, Glenn, and we know it has been a train wreck for this team since Joe has gotten here with the offensive line, there's just that little voice in my head that goes, yeah, but they're probably going to take a lineman.
I was going to say I'd like to see those numbers and then see which teams. Give me the top 5 teams
Right.
investment wise who has missed the most games. Give me that's been the killer. I hate it. I thought about it earlier today. There's a little conversation on the forums on JetNation. I mean, there are people literally that dislike Mekhi Becton so much they're pretending his rookie season never happened. Like that guy sucks. He always sucked. He never showed anything. I'm being ridiculous when I say that Mekhi Becton tossing defensive linemen across the field, that's not a big deal. That was he wasn't good. Mekhi Becton, his rookie film, he looked like he was going to be an all-timer. and you lose that guy, that premium pick at a premium position where it looked every single bit like you had a huge hit, and then it turns into a failure of a pick. That and then AVT. I mean, it's been about as bad as it could have been. I don't know what's worse, picking guys that just those guys can't play, or picking guys who are like, wow, these guys could be future All Pros. Oh, it turns out they can't stay on the field. Like that stings even more because you didn't miss. You just have guys that can't stay on the field. But that again with Joe Douglas, that's why I said I'm not 100% ruling it out in my head. But the point you make, Chris, is I've said that a couple times recently that the only way I can see Joe Douglas going offensive line is if he is looking at his depth chart right now and saying, we're ready to make a run. Like we're Super Bowl ready. And so we can start drafting for the future instead of drafting for this year. I'm not saying he's going to.
But
I'm,
he,
I'm
and
just
he
I'm just asking myself, what would have to be going through Joe Douglas's head to say, I'm not getting Aaron a weapon? And that would have to be, we're ready. We're ready right now. So I can draft guys who won't play this year, but will be part of my future.
And he might feel that way, right? We
He
don't
might.
know how he feels about this roster
Yep.
currently going into draft night. And I think we'll learn a lot with what he does with the number 10 pick. Can you put up a comment for me? JE put it in there, and Charles also had it as well, because I want to talk about something, and I mentioned it a little bit ago, but
Are we
this
talking
idea,
about the
Brian Thomas Jr. Related comments
okay?
are the ones in particular, right? JE talking about or move back for Brian Thomas Jr. about what our thoughts are. And I said it a little bit ago, but I want to reiterate it because I think it's extremely important. The positions that people are moving up for, the Venn diagram crosses over with positions that the Jets are going to be interested in at pick number 10. So when you cross over the Venn diagram, there is this little sliver, and this is the world that you are operating in. And JE, this is not an attack. I'm just using your message here as a launching pad for this conversation. By saying, oh, move back for Brian Thomas Jr., you're assuming that when the Jets pick at number 10, we're in that little sliver where there is a player on the board at either wide receiver or offensive tackle that other teams like, that the New York Jets also don't like. That's what has to happen for the New York Jets to want to move out of number 10. Because again, I'm here to tell you, if number 10 rolls around and Rome Odunze is on the board, I think they're taking Rome Odunze. So it doesn't matter if a team calls them and says, oh, we want to move up for Rome Odunze. They're not going to make that trade. If Joe Alt is on the board, if they really like Talise Fuaga, which we've heard all the way back pre-Senior Bowl that they love this kid, if he's available and there's not 3 or 4 guys that they like and it's just Fuaga and a team calls, they might say, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to stay and pick, because those are the positions that teams are moving up for. And so that's where I find it really hard to believe that we are going to follow the timeline tomorrow night in which it plays out perfectly for the New York Jets to move down a couple of spots, pick up a second round pick, and also address all the other things that they need to address. It's hard. It's what I'm rooting for. I have said it time and time again. It is my number one thing that I want the Jets to do at number 10. I think trading down makes the most sense. But I just don't know if we are going to live in that world with the way that the positional big board is going to match up with the Jets' needs and the way we think the board is going to fall. Now, I will tell you, there is one wrinkle into this that I think opens the door for this. If a Drake May, a JJ McCarthy, or a Bo Nix is on the board at number 10, and a team wants to hop in front of Vegas, wants to hop in front of Denver, and wants to move up, then I think it opens that possibility. But if Drake May goes inside the top 5, if JJ McCarthy goes inside the top 6, if Bo Nix is not liked by anybody else other than Denver at 12, then I find it hard to fathom this scenario playing out where the Jets can move back because the board plays out in a way where they don't love what's on the board. They're picking in the top 10. Like, they're going to like a lot of players.
Right. And the thing is staying in that range, right? Every team is going to have a different number of first round grades, but you want to stay in that range. I've heard 18, I've heard 20, whatever it may be. Couple things there, though. One, I agree with what you're saying. It's got to be if a team wants to move up, but they want the same position the Jets want. The only way that works is if the Jets, like here, saw Daniel Jeremiah tweet about them earlier. I believe it was Daniel Jeremiah saying how teams want to move up. Somebody tweeted, who needs to tackle more than the Saints do? Like the Saints have to move up. Well, if you're the Jets and you're sitting there at 9 and the Saints, or at 10 and the Saints want to move up, you're only moving down 4 spots. And if you look around the room and go, are there 4 guys we're still happy with?
Right.
Okay, fine.
And that's the world you have to live in. You have to be to a point where when you're on the board at 10, you have 4 guys that you have graded very similarly, and you would be happy with any of them. If that's the case, then you can do that. But if the Jets get on the board and the Saints are 14?
Yep.
if they call up the Jets and they want to move up, the Jets know they're moving up for a tackle. And so if the
Right.
Jets only like 2 players and one's a wide receiver, one's a tackle, well, they know the Saints are
It's
going to
too
take the
risky.
tackle more than likely, and the wide receiver might not be there
Yep.
because we don't have to go that far back, Glenn. They did the pick swap with Green Bay. It screwed them out of being able to take Broderick Jones last year.
Yep.
So they're probably gonna learn from that mistake. They're not gonna do that again. And so to me, you have to again live in this world where when they are on the clock at 10, the teams that are wanting to trade up, they have more players on their board that they like than the gap is between where the Jets are picking.
Yep.
That's it.
Basically, you just stay in that range. Stay whatever that number is. First round grades. Stay in that range. But 14, I think wouldn't be bad. 15, so, again, we don't know how many first round grades they have in that room, but
And
it's
hope a big quarterback falls. Hope a Drake May or JJ McCarthy falls.
yeah, and that's the thing. I almost did this as a topic tonight, but it's fun but also nonsensical because it's 100% guessing, but it does seem every year somebody who's projected top 5, top 10, they tumble. And I'm like, who's it going to be? Well, we can guess. Okay, fine. Throw out a name, like flip a coin. We don't know. But every year somebody falls. So you hope it's a guy, projected to go top 4 or 5. And they fall to 8, 9. Then there's teams call and they say, and teams that I'm sure teams are aware. The Jets are short of picks. We would love to get to 10. The Jets are desperate for a 2. Let's call them and see if we can make something happen. And that's the spot the Jets are in right now. And they're going to have a lot of guys on their board. They had 30 guys in to visit. Let's talk about these guys for a little bit, Chris.
We're gonna do this.
We're
Gonna
going to
talk
do it
about
this week.
okay.
For those of you who missed it last week, consider yourselves lucky.
Well, we
So
didn't
there's
do
a
it
few
last
different
week, so we all
sources
missed it.
there's a few different sources that put these things together. Walter Football, Charlie Campbell, they do a great job. In fact, I wanted to pull up a tweet because they had a couple of rumors they threw out there, and they get some good info. So this is real quick. I was going to touch on these real quick because again, Walter Football gets some good info, and this is from Play Like a Jet. Scott Mason tweeted this out earlier. According to Walter Football, the Raiders like Penix. Not sure if they like him enough to move up to 13. Multiple teams, and I heard. I always mention their podcast now. Rick Spielman on their podcast did several teams, and Spielman is not a fan of players not taking part in pre-draft process. And Marvin Harrison did nothing. And Spielman said, I guarantee you there will be teams that move Neighbors over Harrison because they have more information on Harrison. Walter
Right,
Football
but not a team that's going to matter because I think he's going to be the pick for
unlikely.
Arizona.
Yeah,
So
I'm not in that camp, but this Walter Football is claiming, and again, Spielman said he would expect the same. There are teams that have moved Neighbors over Harrison on their board, but both expected to go in the top 6. So really,
what are we
big
doing
deal.
Here? Yeah.
And Adonai Mitchell could slide due to character and medical concerns. I heard that on another pod earlier as well. So that was again,
I have him in my latest predictive mock.
Listen, good player. Some inconsistent production, but I've heard a couple different places say there may be some character things there. But so anyway, Walter Football tracks this thing. Our friend Dom C. We got to get him on after the draft. He's got a spreadsheet where he tracked it as well. So we're gonna go down. There'll be a couple guys that I honestly haven't seen. Matter of fact, we'll start at the top and. The first guy haven't watched him other than some highlights because he's a CFL guy. Quantez Stiggers. I don't know if you've seen him at all, Chris. He's a shorter corner, has a year of pro football under his belt. I'm ignorant here. Why can a guy who's played a year of professional football in Canada, why can't he be like, hey, I'm a free agent, like sign me to the NFL? Why does he? I don't get that he has to enter the draft. I'm not saying he shouldn't have to. I'm saying I'm surprised he does. Like he's not coming out of a college. What's that?
Yeah, it must be the way the agreement probably works between the NFL and the CFL.
Yeah,
would be my guess is
because then the NFL could just poach their players anytime they want.
Right. So it's probably written into their, their working relationship that they probably have. That there's a process if CFL players want to move over to the NFL, they have to declare for the draft or whatever. I'm not going to claim to know the inner workings between the NFL and CFL relationship, but I'll take a guess here on the show.
Another guy, another top 30 visit. Micah Abraham, cornerback out of Marshall. Dude had a ton of PBUs. I watched a couple of his games. Saw him get a couple. Then I can't remember if I looked him up on PFR or PFF, wherever it was. And he did. He had like 14 PB, 12 one year, and he's again not a huge corner, but he can play the boundary and was productive in college. Again, small college, small low level competition. He's not playing in the SEC, but he still looks like he's got a knack for getting to the ball from what I saw. Um, Next up, Muhammad Kamara, Colorado State. Any thoughts on him, Chris?
No, there's a lot of these guys that they brought. I'm always intrigued by this, right? Because the
Yeah.
top 30 list is always fascinating because they just bring teams always do this. They bring
Yep.
in a bunch of guys that you're like, why are you bringing in that guy on a top 30 visit? And so these first couple names that you're bringing up are certainly fall into that bucket of not paying super close attention to these guys, but the Jets clearly want to know something about them. We
Right.
don't know what it is, but they want to know something. Maybe they are laying the foundation for when these guys are UDFAs, right? I mean, that's probably part of the process
Some
here as
some of the
well.
guys on this list I would put in that category. Those two I think will get drafted.
No, I right. I
But
wasn't
yeah,
talking about
yeah, I see what you mean.
just in general, right? You bring in these guys because you want to lay the groundwork for UDFA stuff, or you bring in a guy that you didn't really get enough time with at an event, whether it was the combine or a pro day or the Senior Bowl, and you're like, I just need like just a day with this guy, right? Just let me just finalize all of this stuff, and then there's like there are guys on the list like they have like didn't Jane Daniels take a top 30 with them like
Yeah.
Drake May, like there are guys on there that you look and you're like, the Jets are not taking those guys at 10. Like it's one, they're not getting there. Two, the Jets aren't entertaining that. So that's why I love this list and I love going through it. But a lot of these guys, I don't, other than the big names, I have not gotten a chance to take a look at.
Okay, so we'll go through Muhammad Kamara, pass rusher from Colorado State. Doesn't have the longest arms, at least it didn't look like it to me on film, but sort of high motor, productive guy. They had him in. They had Marshawn Nealand in. I heard Marshawn Nealand's name a bunch,
Uh-huh.
and honestly didn't watch him till yesterday. I watched 3 of his games. I like him a lot. Powerful guy. I think he was listed at 270. He played like a guy who was stronger than that. Good speed to power. Not a super explosive bendy guy, but absolutely a guy who can be a player off the edge, really powerful. Chop Robinson, Penn State edge rusher,
Oh yeah.
liked him. He's a guy who jumped there. There's a few Penn State defenders, including some guys who will be coming out next year who I think are going to be really high draft picks. But Chop is a guy who jumped out at me last year. His combine was off the charts. Go ahead.
But because here's where I start to lose it. Chop Robinson's probably going to be a first round pick.
Yeah.
We're bringing in Chop Robinson for a 30 visit. We better not be considering taking him at number 10. No offense to Chop Robinson, but we better not be taking an edge at 10.
Yeah, like I said, it's and you said they do weird stuff with it. Sometimes sometimes I think it's we like this guy so much we want to take notes on him now for when he hits free agency. Like
That's true. There's
file that away,
Yep.
and this could be a guy we look at in the future if he gets to that point.
Yep. You see that. You'll
like
see
you
that
said,
a lot. You'll see
yeah,
a
like
lot
they're
of.
not taking him at 10, and you're not getting him outside the first round.
You'll see that a lot where a guy hits free agency, gets cut by a team, it doesn't work, and he gets
Yep.
picked up, and the beat writer will be like, "Yep, this team did their work
Had
on
him in
him
for a
back in the
visit.
2022 draft when they had him in for a top 30 visit and local to the area, whatever connections they can come up with." So yeah, you'll see that a lot. So that's probably what they're doing because like we're not taking Dallas Turner at 10, right? We're not taking Jared
Right.
Verse. Lots like we're not right because there's part of me that
Exactly.
wonders. There's part of me that's concerned because this is Joe. Joe loves himself some pass rushers.
Javante Jean Baptiste, Notre Dame edge guy. Watched a bunch of Notre Dame a week or two ago, and he jumped out a fair number of times. Guy always around the ball, long limbed guy. Sort of, I'd have to look, but kind of just in terms of anytime I see like these lanky edge rushers, it makes me think of Jason Taylor because I remember the first time I heard his measurements, I was so surprised at how you just assume he's this huge guy because he's killing people. And then when you look at his measurements, you're like, he was actually like a lean dude. And he had those long arms. He could reach past the tackle and grab the quarterback by the collar.
Maybe they're
Who do we
asking
have
him
after
about
that?
Joe Alt as a teammate, do some extra work on Joe Alt.
Jordan Morgan.
Oh.
Yeah. And with Morgan, let's see, they also met him at the Senior Bowl and the Combine, according to Dom.
You know how I feel about Jordan Morgan. I think he's a first round talent. I think he can play tackle. I know some people think he's probably going to have to slide inside at guard. I was super impressed with what I got to see from him out here. Living in Arizona, I have a chance to have a really in depth look at both that team and Arizona State on a pretty regular basis. In my predictive mock, I have him going to San Francisco of all places. I love this kid. I think he's one of my. I think when we did our guys that I had Jordan Morgan down as one of my guys, right?
I believe you did. Yes.
Believe
Yes.
I put him on there, even though I still have him as a first round player. Yeah, I said trade back, take Jordan Morgan, take Ricky Pearsall with the second, take Jalen Wright with the third, first 3 picks on offense, be fantastic.
All right. We got Justin Rogers and Mason Smith, interior D linemen from Auburn and
I mean,
LSU, respectively.
there's
They
one thing
also
Joe's going to
attended
do.
Mason's. What's that?
If there's one thing Joe is going to do is he's going to give top 30 visits to interior defensive linemen, and
Yeah.
he's going to want to know.
Yeah. And listen, they have to get somebody else on that interior who's not on a 1-year deal. Get somebody who's going to be around for a little while. You can't just keep signing veterans to 1-year deals every year. I mean, maybe you can, but I would imagine you want some continuity. Like Kinlaw's an interesting guy because Kinlaw's production over the last 5 or 6 games last year was probably the best of his career. So do they feel like the lights come on for him? Like, let's bring him in for a
Well,
year, let him prove what he can do, and then we give him a 4-year deal.
same system too, right? That's probably another reason why they felt comfortable saying, okay, he had this production late in the season, same system, really
Yep.
good coach on the defensive side of the ball that can get a lot out of him. So we feel like bringing him in, we can take this to the next level.
Christian Boyd, I haven't watched. He's a Northern Iowa guy. It's so tough to get all 22 on these guys. Like,
Really?
I'm
It's
sure
tough
if
to
I
get
look on
Northern Iowa
YouTube,
tape. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure if I go on YouTube, I'll find
Yeah.
a couple games with some bad angles. Jamal Hill, he's a guy who came in last week, I think. Oregon linebacker. And I don't, maybe he's a UDFA type, maybe he's a day 3 guy, but we know how the Jets in the past have grabbed guys that they can move from safety to linebacker. Well, here's a guy that Oregon already did the work for you. He was a safety, they moved him to linebacker, and he played well. In fact, just a day or 2 after the Jets had him in, I saw a spot, it popped up on my Twitter. Emery Hunt was talking about some sleepers, and he mentioned Hill. Said he's a guy who looked like a different player when they moved him. That was one thing that jumped out at me. I knew there had to be some athleticism when they had him in. I pulled up some Oregon All 22 and watched him, and very early on, I saw him. Track a running back who went in motion, followed him out to the boundary, ran down the field with him in coverage, and held his own. So I was like, all right, he's an athlete. And then find out after that he was a DB, so he converted. So some athleticism there, and a guy who, like I said, the work's already been done, or at least the process has already started. Now Giovanni Manu, isn't this the guy Dylan tweeted us about? It must be.
Oh, it might be.
Yeah, because it says British Columbia.
Oh yeah, this is definitely that guy that
Yeah,
he
so this is
shouted
a
out. Yeah.
guy I honestly have never seen and only heard of last week because somebody, and Dylan sent us the tweet saying like 10 teams were having this guy in for a visit. University of British Columbia. The Jets had him for a 30 and they had him in for a private workout. So they wanted to take a look at this guy.
I'm checking our group DM, which folks, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in our group DM where we get sidetracked.
Just a bit.
I'm trying to see if I can find the tweet in
Yeah.
conjunction with.
See which teams had him in.
Yeah.
Kieran Amagaji, who we've talked about. I don't know if you had a chance to watch him yet, Chris. He's the guy we discussed also with Emery Hunt, who said he was a big fan. I actually just looked yesterday, the day before, on the Caddies Cut-Ups, which is the All-22 we use, and they've actually uploaded a bunch of Yale games. So I'm going to try to watch some of it. I watched a little bit of them yesterday. I'm going to watch a little bit more tonight or tomorrow. Little fella out of Notre Dame by the name of Joe Alt.
Oh, he's
came
good.
in on a 30.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
He's another one of those UDFA types. And who else we got? J.C. Latham and Troy Fatanu. Here's a note, Crit. Not a note, but just a thought I had.
Okay.
Talise Fuaga, who I tweeted out months ago. When it looked like the Jets were going to be picking in the 15 range before they won a couple games late, I tweeted out like, "Hey, if the Jets are going to be at 15, they better hope this guy Fuaga's still there. He should be an option." At least I think it was 15, whatever it was. And this is of course before they got Moses, but now they've got him. And I still see people saying, we got to get this guy like Fuaga's. And, you mentioned earlier, people have said Joe Douglas loves him. And I love him too. I think he's going to be a really good player. But if you're drafting a tackle in the first round because you think your left tackle might get hurt, but you're going to draft a right tackle? Like, if the Jets are taking a tackle, you better be taking a guy who has played some left tackle. Now, there are those who say, I mentioned to you, Jim Nagy tweeted that he thinks he can play left tackle, but he's not shown that. There are some who say people have said draft him and start him at guard, and move AVT to the left side and bench Simpson. That I can live with the fact that he's playing. But if you're drafting a tackle because you're worried about Tyron Smith getting hurt, but you draft a right tackle, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, and please, someone explain to me how we're gonna draft Fuaga, we're gonna move AVT, we're gonna bench Simpson, who we just gave a free agency contract to without even seeing him play for. Like, what?
I mean,
I'm
again,
uninterested in any of that.
depending on how the board falls, and I've said it, if the Jets were to move down to say 23, and JPJ is there or Graham Barton, and you take them, I would absolutely start them over Simpson. But Fuaga, again, the whole idea to me, the only reason it's somewhat understandable that you would take a tackle is because Tyron Smith's injury history. But then you want me to draft the right tackle.
Or you really, 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 really love a guy and you're okay with him sitting. Like, you're not going to take Fuaga with the idea of we're going to make him a left tackle. You're going to draft Fuaga because you really love Fuaga as your long-term right tackle.
But then you really are drafting a guy who's probably not going to play. I mean, the whole idea behind the lineman is going to play is Tyron Smith is going to get hurt.
And this is our time of year, right? This is where we are the hopeful, optimistic version of being Jets fans. But I'm here to tell you, every year, the Jets right tackle gets hurt. So you cannot tell me that you're drafting a player that's not going to play. Like, Fuaga probably is going to play. If you drafted him, he's going to play.
But he's not going to. But who's going to play left tackle when Smith gets hurt? Because that's the whole thing. Smith's going to get hurt. Moses missed 3 games last year. Other than that, he played 85,000 in a row.
Okay, and AVT has not finished a season, and
right.
We can.
But again, tackle to me the big thing is Smith, and he's the one with the biggest, most concerning injury history at the most important position.
Correct. If you're going into the drafting with the idea of Tyron Smith is going to get hurt, then I think that moves Fuaga where I would put him on my personal board, right? Mm-hmm. But if I'm just looking at offensive linemen as a whole, I have Fuaga pretty high up there. But if you were just looking to take somebody because you think Tyron Smith's not going to be able to give you a majority of the season and you're trying to hedge and you're trying to get a long-term answer, then yes, I think Alt, I think Fashanu, I think those guys go above Fuaga. But I don't, again, I think I don't know what they're going to do. I think wide receiver's more in play than tackle is, but I'm not ruling it out. But
I think it's pass catcher, and then they get a tackle in free agency. Someone here says trade down with New Orleans, get a second. Absolutely. JE says Christian Haynes is a sleeper. I don't feel. Here's the thing with sleepers.
He's not a sleeper.
They don't really exist anymore because everyone has the internet and everyone has YouTube, and we can all. I get what you're saying, JE. He's a guy who's going to be a very good player who won't go very early, but they've been talking about him since pre-Senior Bowl, and then once he did what he did at the Senior Bowl, he was on everybody's radar.
Yeah, I think we need to move.
Sleepers are UDFAs now. Yeah. There's no sleepers. You mentioned 7th round prospects, and people are like, oh yeah, I know who that guy is.
Yeah, I think we need to move the terminology that we use here when it comes to players, because I think what JE is saying is this is a guy that you're going to get on day 2 that's going to be an impact starter for you.
Yes.
And I think using the term sleeper is just misappropriated there. Like these are guys that are on day 2 that we're going to look back 2-3 years from now. We're going to say that guy should have been a first rounder. We did it with wide receivers. We do it with running backs. We do it with quarterbacks. Like it happens all the time. And so I think we just need to come up with a new term for it, because I just don't think they're sleepers. I just think they're players that get taken on day 2 and then end up being stars.
Here's speaking of this, let me see.
Okay.
If I can, let me. Here's a sleeper for you, a true sleeper.
True sleeper.
This is a guy I actually was talking about him a couple years ago.
Real quick, while you're pulling up whatever you're pulling up, JE, I'll give you another example, because I way early on in this process was like, I'm kind of thinking this Ricky Pearsall guy's pretty good. Like I think I'm in on Ricky Pearsall. I can't call him a sleeper because everybody's jumping on the boat right now and they're saying Ricky Pearsall's a great day 2 target. So like he's not a sleeper anymore. Like you just lose, the ability to call people sleepers.
So here's a guy, Odiu Hilaire, wide receiver from Bowling Green. I'm going to show you this catch.
Okay.
This is not a fluke or an aberration. This dude makes some of the most ridiculous catches you'll ever see. Wait till you get the other angle on this. He's number 1, Bowling Green wideout. bends backward behind the DB's back and pulls the ball in.
Excuse me?
That's one of the most ridiculous. Look at this. Slows down, contorts himself to get behind the guy who's in front of him, and pulls it in. May even take it off his back. I'm not sure.
No, I think it's clean the whole way.
I think that's actually. I think it might be a
Which
clean
I think
catch.
makes it even more impressive that it's extremely clean.
Yeah, that. Let me pull one more
Please,
for
if it's
Hilaire.
going to look like that, then I'm interested. Yes.
Let's see.
New York Jets says tomorrow will New York Jets FL says tomorrow will be exciting and a relief also because the buildup has been going for what feels like a month now. No, it's actually sad in a way too because like it's a disappointment because we're just done, and then we got to
Yeah,
start it up
that one
again
he
for the
just
next
reaches
cycle.
behind him. He just reaches behind. It's a throw that's a little bit behind. He had one. He had a like fully extended diving catch on. I think it was like the first or second play of the game against Michigan. And that one for some reason I'm not finding. Let's see. Big gain on slant. Let's see what this one is.
It's
The
hard when you have
problem is
400,000 clips in your.
I have so many thousands and thousands. Yeah, that's an easy one.
I mean, he's just wide open, but I love it.
Yeah, I've got like 8,000 clips, and early on, honestly, I may have been spelling his name wrong, so I'm looking for it one way now. It's Odieu, I believe, Hilaire. Anyway, I've just been so shocked I've not seen his name. I figured he wasn't coming out. And then I looked at a list the other day and he was like prospect number 580 something. And I was like, that dude makes a lot of crazy catches. But anyway, I digress. Back to the 30s. We got J.C. Latham, Troy Fatanu, who I mentioned. We know the story there. They're both top linemen. Latham has a chance to be a top 10 guy. Fatanu, a versatile guy who Dylan wrote a scouting profile on him for JetNation. Jordan Travis, Florida State quarterback. Love it. Michael Pratt, Tulane quarterback. I like
I
that,
mean,
but I think I'm a bigger Travis guy and you're a bigger Pratt guy, but I'd be happy with either one. They
agreed
did have
on
a private
agreed.
workout with him. Michael Hires, Samford. Hadn't watched him till today when I saw the name.
Okay.
Crazy. I mean, he's playing at Samford. His completion percentage is like 72% last year. Some of the balls he reminded me, maybe not as high in arching, and I don't. This may be too far back for you, Chris, but former Jet who was traded to the Saints, Jeff Blake. Jeff Blake used to throw touchdown passes like he was messing around in the street with his buddies. Like he would drop back and he played for the Saints, and it was like he was trying to scrape the roof of the dome, and it would come down right in the dude's hands, like the most.
Like a moon
And
ball, like a Russell
it was
Wilson moon
ridiculous, and
ball.
he would do it all the time. And that's what I saw. But again, with Hires, watch them earlier. They were all accurate. He's dropping back and throwing these balloons, and you're like, oh my god! And then there's the receiver right in his arms. So that was a little bit wild. But again, not doesn't move well. That doesn't.
That's
I
the
feel like you
problem in
got to have a
today's
guy who
NFL.
escapes
Yeah.
pressure nowadays.
Yeah.
That did jump out at me a little bit. So that's him. That's Hires. Um, Brock Bowers. No need to talk about him
He's
anymore.
great. He's fantastic.
Brendan Rice,
Okay.
USC
Mhm.
receiver who looked good at the Senior Bowl, was a lot
Yeah.
thicker, a lot like much stronger build than I thought. From watching him on film down at the Senior Bowl, that was pretty impressive. Really good hands. Roman Wilson's stock. I don't know.
It's
The talk around him has really
fallen a little bit.
simmered down since the
Yeah.
Senior Bowl. Him and Ricky Pearsall at the Senior Bowl were awesome.
And Ricky
Um,
Pearsall's going this way, and Roman Wilson's kind of going this way, or just basically staying flat.
yeah. There hasn't been a lot of talk around him. Romo Dunze, we talked about. I think if the Jets stay at 10, it's him or Bowers.
Yes.
Malik Neighbors won't be there. The Jets met with him. Troy Franklin, explosive. He'll be a later round guy or mid round anyway. Great speed, big play guy, but he's not really going to break any tackles. Whereas the next guy who they had in, Malachi Corley, he is going to break a lot of tackles.
That's exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah. He did it. He did it in college. And I said the other day, I think the first comment I made at the Senior Bowl about any player after we walked out and looked at them on the field, I said to Dylan, I was like, Malachi Corley is huge. And apparently he tweeted out some before and afters over the past several months. That dude went from like narrow frame to his shoulders are out here. I'm like, that's on film. I'm like, that guy looks thin. Well, he bulked up a lot. So good on him. He's put in the work. Tez Walker, who someone just mentioned in the chat, he had, everyone talked about he had a lot of drops in Mobile. I didn't see a lot on film, but I did look the other day. He had 2 or 3, and he only had like 60 targets. So that isn't a great rate.
Or he missed the
Um,
start of the season because he was dealing with that whole NCAA stuff and the
yeah,
whole back and forth, and so he didn't.
yeah,
And then he started like midway through the season, and so
yeah.
you're just
Could
your
have been
whole
some weirdness there.
yeah, your whole balance is thrown off. Like you're not in a rhythm. Like it's just really really hard to hit the ground running. So I think he's
Yep.
probably a late day 2 guy. I think.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's Tajon Palmer, UAB. I thought he looked. I forget what his measurements are. I know when I looked at them, I was like, wow, he played a lot bigger than that to me. Really strong dude. He had a really high average yards per catch. I watched a few of his games, and he had a couple plays where he beat some guys. Quick slant, run over a guy, avoid another guy. But I felt like I saw 2 or 3 plays where I don't know if the defense was lost or if they had the most brilliant offensive coordinator in college football. But he had several balls where like he made a catch and you didn't see a defender. I'm like, this guy's just literally like 70 yards to the house untouched. And I'm like, and he had a few of those. So I'm like, well, yeah, he's gonna have that great yard. Like, that's not gonna happen in the NFL. But that's not to say he didn't make some plays. And again, I thought he played bigger than his size. I can't remember what he measured in at. But those are the top 30s. Again, they'll pick. I think last year they had Zaire Barnes and Zach Kuntz did come in on 30s, and they drafted both of those guys. That was point again, credit where it's due. Dom was the one who noticed that and let me know because I was saying, again, Chris, as we said at the beginning, you just don't know what's going on with these 30s. Last year, every single feasible, legal, possible way you can meet with a player, they met with John Michael Schmitz. And they did not meet one time with Joe Tippmann.
And then they took
And then
Tippmann over Schmitz when
they were
they were
both
both
on the
on the board.
board, and they
It's
took Tippmann.
unbelievable, right?
So a lot of it is just, and everybody, listen, everyone knew they needed a center. So clearly that's what they were doing. We need a center. Everyone knows we need a center. There's 2 guys. Let's meet with the one guy nonstop, and we won't even look in the other guy's direction.
Now,
And that's who we're taking.
Now, what that tells you is how much they believed in the work that they had done on Tippmann.
Right, exactly.
Like they felt extremely confident in the work that they did. That they didn't feel they needed to use a 30.
It does happen, and I love those stories. I'm sure you've heard Willie McGinnis talk about the Patriots. He's like, they didn't say a word to me before the draft. Nobody from New England spoke to me at all, and then they take me in the first round. And like
draft's wild, man.
Sometimes you see enough of a guy on film that you're like, that dude is awesome.
Well,
they're calling coaches, they're calling the university.
Sure.
Do I have any red flags? Anything to worry about? Okay, great. Coaches that I know have vouched for this kid. I've seen enough on film. I think he's a stud. I'm drafting that guy.
Do I need to bring in Marvin Harrison Jr. for a 30 visit?
No.
I feel like I can get enough information by just talking to people.
Listen, same thing. I see these people. Bowers didn't run the 40. Did you see him outrun the defense every week? Like, do you think there's some chance all those DBs ran 4.9s and Bowers is running a 4.7 looking like a speedster?
By the way, Alex Mortensen, the offensive coordinator at UAB for head coach Trent Dilfer at UAB. There you go.
I forgot that's where Dilfer was.
Thought I'd give you that information.
Good on him. Sione Vaki. I like him, and I like him a lot, but one thing that jumped out, and it can be coached, but you love guys that play with their hair on fire, but too often I saw him play out of control and overrun guys and miss tackles, and you're like, slow down. Love the enthusiasm, but settle down because
that's
guys
the Utah
are going to
way.
shoot you out of your shoes.
Right, that's the Utah way, right? They are the often looked past team in the Pac-12, right? People overlook them and they just play with a little bit of an extra oomph, very similar to an Oregon State, right? Where they're not looked as highly upon in the Pac-12.
Right.
And so that team, that coach gets more out of them by playing with that little bit of an edge. But sometimes if you're not controlled chaos, you can put yourself into some bad situations. So you got to be careful.
Frankie Louvu, right? Frankie Louvu. You love his style.
Yes.
But sometimes he's like plays over there. But
Jordan Whitehead,
a really good player.
Jordan Whitehead, right?
Yeah. Well, sometimes that was just a matter of bad angles, but I get what you're saying. But yeah, Vaki, and he played both ways legitimately. He had a game against UCLA. I think he had like 12 carries as a running back, and had put up some pretty good numbers too. So
Definitely a player you can use as a gadget player, right, in that regard then.
Absolutely. That's what listen, I probably value it too much, but I love versatility. And especially at the rate that we see guys get injured. I'm like,
Sure, but you got to be careful, right? Like you got to, you have to love
no,
the player.
reckless. I just want versatility. I don't even care if you're good. If you're versatile,
If you can just be out there
you
in
can play
multiple
for my
spots,
team.
get on my team.
Mock drafts 2.0.
Oh, jeez.
We don't listen. I don't. I
Is
get
this,
people just love mock draft. That's what I literally saw a mock draft. I forget which site it was. Our final mock 15.0.
yeah.
I'm like
So
15.0. You really?
is this
But
is this
it
is
must
this
get the
final?
clicks, man.
Is this final? Because if we're gonna do ours, am I allowed to change this after I talk about it?
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Well, I mean, the three of us are doing mock drafts. And by the way, if you're just tuning in, you don't know, tomorrow night we are doing a live draft watch along. We are just hanging out. It's not going to be some super overproduced like we're going to
Nope.
have fancy. We're just hanging out. It's
I might
three
be drunk by
buddies.
the end of it.
It's three buddies hanging out, probably
Yep.
drinking some alcohol, just watching the draft together. So if you like that kind of vibe, I know in the past I've worked on some shows that are a little bit more highly produced stuff. We're just hanging out, having a good time watching the draft, reacting to picks, having a good time. We're going to probably talk over each other. We're going to be drinking. It's just going to be three guys who are Jets fans having fun watching the draft. But at the same time, we're all going to have our mock drafts and we're going to see who does the best, right? Like I want to win.
See, I think, and this because we've never done a live show before through the whole draft. I think we should mock as we go because then we know who's really on the board. Like,
okay, if you want to do that for the show, that's fine. I'm going to tweet out my final predictive mock tomorrow morning when I'm done with it.
Yeah, that's
okay. That's fine.
I thought about that because there was a year because we talked about how hard it is to predict drafts. I did one the year the Jets took the I'm drawing a blank on the
give me a position, year, something. Give
the
me something to help
tackle
you.
a few years ago. He
Mekhi
played for
Becton.
Seattle now. The Dallas. Let's Adoga, the Chuma Adoga year.
Chuma Adoga. Okay.
For some reason, I'm having a hard time remembering anyone they took before or after him. That was the Chuma Adoga draft for some reason. Never did this before in my life. I hit the first three picks. This is like day before draft. I was right on picks 1, 2, and 3. And then the first one I was wrong on was Adoga, but I had him in the next round, so they took him a round earlier, and then found out from multiple reports, I think it was the other Connor McGovern, not the one the Jets signed, but the other one.
The Dallas one.
He was the guy that I had to the Jets the round before, and then Adoga. And then after the Jets took Adoga, the story came out that the Jets were targeting McGovern, but he was gone, so they took Adoga. I was like, I went like 5 for 4 for 4, 5 for 5. Like, if I can get 1 or 2, I'm thrilled, especially outside of round 1. The round 1 stuff, But I got like, it was crazy. I got 3, 4, 5 in one draft. That was nuts. But anyway, I digress. Back to the.
We're doing this.
Yes, let's roll along. Go ahead and I'll kick us off. I'll start off with round 1. Funny because this exact scenario came up in our conversation with the chat, and this exact player came up in our conversation with the chat. I traded down. Listen, I knew the Colts wanted Brock Bowers. I knew they were taking him. I knew he wasn't going to be there for me, but I had to do what was right for the team and acquire a second-round pick. Moved down to 15 with the Colts, acquired pick 46 in return, and I took LSU wide receiver Brian Thomas.
Okay, hold on. Give me that trade one more time.
I gave up pick 10 in exchange for picks 15 and 46.
So you got 15 and 46. So you added a second by moving down a couple of spots.
Yes, 5 spots.
Okay.
And I picked and they took Brock Bowers. Sure enough, I knew they were going to do that. And I took Brian Thomas. Big, fast, great contact balance, tough to bring down. And the second Brian Thomas the Jets will have drafted in my time as a fan.
So it's interesting, right? Because when we do these, we're at the mercy, depending on which mock draft simulator you use, you're at the mercy of the way the board plays out for you. And everybody knows how anti this I am. But I did not find a trade that I liked. And the wide receivers weren't available. And Joe Alt was staring me in the face. But I didn't take Joe Alt because Brock Bowers was also staring me in the face. And I just thought, I think they're going to take the offensive weapon more than they will take the tackle. So I took Brock Bowers.
There you go. So as long as he lands with them in some scenario, I'm good. But again, I've said it. I think it's trade down or pass catcher. I think that's it. Pick 46. This was a little weird because there were 4 tackles on the board, and I could have taken any of them. Well, maybe not that early for one of them. I took Jordan Morgan.
Oh, yeah.
But it could have been Roger Rosengarten was still on the board. Amagaji was still on the board. Jordan Morgan was there, and Patrick Paul was there. I could have taken any of the 4. Again, Amagaji, I don't know where they have him on their board. Maybe the Yale competition will knock him down a bit. But I probably would have taken Rosengarten. But I'd be surprised if he is there in that spot. But that's what I went with. So I got Brian Thomas at 15 and Jordan Morgan at 46.
Okay, so you do not have 72 now, right?
I do.
So then you have to go. You go next then, because then I don't have 46. I didn't make that trade.
Gotcha. At 72, I got someone to play alongside Quinnen Williams for the long term, and I got Clemson DT Rook Orororo.
Okay. At 72, the board fell. You're not going to believe me when I say this, but I just want you to know the board fell this way, okay?
Okay.
Ricky Pearsall was available at 72. So I took him.
Here's the thing.
So I took him.
I 100% believe that, and I think I did it in this one. Sometimes I take the guy, and sometimes I go, look,
no,
I know he's not going to be there.
No, listen.
I want him.
Right, so I'm taking him. I'm taking him.
I did one the other day, and I refreshed it, and it was like Marvin Harrison was there at 10. I was like, I'm not doing this. This is a waste of everybody's time. So, all right. So, Ruka Rororo, do you have 111?
I do.
Go ahead. You leapfrog now.
I took an offensive tackle from Yale. You familiar with him?
I think I've heard of this young man.
Yes, he was available to me at 111, and so I went offense with my first 3 picks. I went Brock Bowers at tight end, Ricky Pearsall at wide receiver, and then Kieran Amagaji. Amagaji. I'm terrible with names. It's brutal. It's tough for me.
That's the way I just say. I don't know if I'm saying it right. I just say it confidently, so people think I'm saying it right.
Okay. So Amagaji. I'm going to do the same thing then and say it with confidence. And I took him at 111.
All right. For me, 111. Matter of fact, a guy I think you took, or he was one of your guys, I forget.
Okay.
Has been one of my guys for a while, but I keep going back and forth. Really doesn't matter. I love both these guys. I could have had Hicks, but instead I went with Wake Forest safety Malik Mustafa. I think Mustafa's more athletic, can cover ground a little better. And despite not being the biggest guy, he hits like a truck. So I think he can be a guy the Jets move around quite a bit. Malik Mustafa, safety out of Wake Forest at 111.
134 is the next one for you?
Yep.
All right, so at 134, that's the pick that I have. I decided that the New York Jets were not going to leave the 2024 NFL Draft without a defensive lineman. So Mekhi Wingo, defensive lineman out of LSU, the pick for me at 134.
All right.
SEC D lineman, come on, Joe Douglas ain't going to pass that up.
Can't go wrong. And I went at 134. This I felt was a good spot to go with a quarterback, Michael Pratt, Tulane quarterback. I'm seeing Jordan Morgan now. These people project him 6th, 7th round. Like, I just don't see that.
No.
I don't see that. I would love it. I just don't see it. But I went with Pratt.
185, your next pick?
Yep.
Okay, so I also have 185. I took a quarterback at 185. Took Jordan Travis, quarterback out of Florida State.
I said Jordan Morgan. Jordan Travis, of course. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You said Jordan Morgan. It scared me. I'm like,
yeah, no, I meant Jordan Travis. I'm looking at Jordan Morgan's name, and I'm thinking of Jordan Travis.
No, I took Jordan Travis at 185.
Yeah, that's like I said. If he's there,
Michael Pratt wasn't available, so Jordan Travis is the next guy that
I took him. That's why he wasn't there.
That's fair enough.
And funny, I didn't even realize I did this, and I can't remember if it was on your show. I was telling someone recently how much I'm a fan of doing this.
Okay.
Have been for some time. Help a rookie feel comfortable. I drafted his teammate, Jaquan Jackson, Tulane wide receiver. Thought he looked really good at the Senior Bowl, ran some 9 routes and smoked some of those DBs. And I always love the idea, let them room together in camp. Let them work together in the playbook. A guy he's spent time on the field, in the huddle, on game day. And now you have a rookie quarterback developing behind a veteran and a rookie receiver for them to work together and develop. And I think teams don't do that enough, to be honest.
203, the next pick.
I got 207. Maybe I included that in my trade.
Yeah, maybe you did some trading.
I'll
do 203 real quick, then you can get to 207. Yeah. I took TCU corner Josh Newton at
Okay.
203. Again, kind of in the similar vein, we're talking about Makai Wingo, defensive lineman. I think the Jets are going to want to come out of this draft with a defensive back in some capacity. Feels like they always do that. And so this felt like a comfortable place after I checked off a lot of the other boxes that I wanted to get out of here with the draft. I took Josh Newton, corner out of TCU.
All right. Johnny P, I see your comments. We'll pop those up in a second. We'll finish these mocks. 207. Looking at the Jets depth chart earlier, and it's,
Okay.
there's certain things we know and we're aware of, but when you see it
Yeah.
on paper, it looks that much scarier. Not a lot of depth at corner at all.
That's why I just took Josh. That's why I took Josh
Yeah.
Newton.
Yeah. So I'm taking, give me an SEC corner, Nehemiah Pritchett.
Okay, that's good.
Experienced guy. I honestly feel like I've been watching him for 4 years now. But he's a guy I liked. I liked him in Mobile, and he was there at 207. So I've got a guy coming from a major program in the most competitive division in college football with a ton of playing time under his belt, and we need a backup corner.
257, your last pick?
257.
257. Let me just. I think I'm going to make the same point that you just made, just with a different position. But I just want to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn. Glenn, when I go to the depth chart for the New York Jets, you know what other position really kind of just stares at you as it's a problem? Could use some extra pieces.
Linebacker.
That's a good one. But safety is also another one where I think some depth could be required. And so,
Oh, that's right. You haven't taken one yet, have you? That's right.
So why not take a safety with pick 257? Why not take a guy that was at the Reese's Senior Bowl? Why not take Ohio State safety Josh Proctor with pick 257?
Again, major program, tons
Yeah,
of
give me a
experience.
big program, safety, position of depth, checking boxes all over the place.
Yep. My final pick, guy that I tweeted about probably, I don't know, much earlier this season. Thought he would run well at Indy. He ran even better than I had hoped. He is a linebacker. He is the type of guy you want in today's game. If you're playing the Ravens and you need somebody to spy Lamar Jackson, give me Kalen DeLoach out of Florida State.
Okay. All right. I think we both did well. I'd be happy with
I,
either
I,
of those.
I like them. I would give us a passing grade.
I'd be happy with either of those.
All right. And Johnny P says, let's see, what do we got, Johnny? Couple things. One, there's a nightmare scenario. All 3 wide receivers are gone. The top OTs are gone. And there's not been a single defensive player taken. And we have our choice. Don't trust Salah here. We talked about this briefly, Chris, about there have been 1 or 2 mocks that have said a defensive player. I think in that scenario, it's Bowers. If the receivers are gone and the tackles are gone, it's Bowers in my mind. But if we want to play that game of their best option as a defensive player, I think they'll reach. They will trade down or they will take the best offensive player on the board. Now, listen, if they've got a defensive player that's graded 11 points higher than the next offensive player, we may have to be ready for them to take a defensive player. There aren't enough offensive players, or there are enough offensive players in round 1 that somebody will be there at 10. Be it a receiver, be it Bowers, be it a tackle. That's what they're going to do. I think it's Bowers or receiver. If the 3 receivers are got, it could even be Brian Thomas. I don't love that at 10, but the guy can play, and he is what they need. I just can't see any world where it's a defensive player.
There are 9 teams picking in front of the New York Jets. At least 3 of them are taking quarterbacks. That leaves 6 teams picking in front of the New York Jets. You're telling me the Jets won't have 7 highly rated offensive players?
Right.
I find that hard to believe. I also don't think this is a nightmare scenario. If all 3 wide receivers are gone and the top offensive tackle is gone and Dallas Turner is available or any of the good defensive players, I think I'd be okay if the Jets took a defensive player. That's a scenario where I'd be okay with it.
And when we had that conversation, Chris, I did say to you, my knee jerk, my initial reaction was no way you take a defensive player. But then I thought about it and said, well, it won't be fun on draft night, but on opening day, when that guy's lining up next to Quinnen Williams, I think I'd be okay with it. I think I'd be all right with watching opposing quarterbacks getting their brains kicked in all day. And again, they should still have enough on offense. Second one that no one is discussing, recently first round offensive tackles have not been safe picks.
I would like to make sure I don't speak out of turn here before I tell Johnny that he's absolutely wrong. I just want to make sure. What do we mean by recent?
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually saw a number today that tackle, center, guard have been the 3 safest positions over the last 20 years.
How's Paris Johnson working in Arizona?
Yeah, there are a lot, but again, as I mentioned earlier, guys might struggle. Penei Sewell struggled, but offensive line across the board, I think center might. I think it is. I think center right now has the. I think the criteria they used just to keep it simple because there's so many arguments. Who's a hit? Who's a miss? Who
Sure.
decides? Blah blah blah. They basically looked at the last 20 years of draft picks and which players earned a second contract. And centers did it at a higher rate than anyone. And then I think it was tackles and then guards.
I mean,
Um,
the 2021 draft. So 3 drafts ago, Penei Sewell, who just got the bag today, was the first offensive lineman taken. The next 2 offensive linemen taken were Rashawn Slater and Elijah
well, he
Vera
is saying
Tucker.
OT to be clear, just because I didn't know
All
who you were
right.
about to read. If you were going to say a guard, I'm just saying he
Rashawn
specified
Slater
OT.
and Elijah Vera Tucker. I mean, I know Elijah Vera Tucker is
Right.
technically a
He's
guard, but
both.
he's played every position except center along the offensive lineman. So I'm just gonna,
Yes.
like I get it. I understand there are some busts, right? There's Alec Leatherwoods in there. Like I can find busts,
Right.
but
The
I don't
rate
know.
hasn't been bad.
Hasn't been awful. Coach is in the chat. Coach, what's
Robert
up?
Salas joined the show.
There's one more sleep zone.
Doesn't
Right.
surprise me. He's not doing anything to get ready for the draft. He's decided to
Come on.
tune in and see what we're
Be
doing.
nice to coach. Be nice to
Listen,
coach.
I've been really rough on Salah this offseason, but I'm well, maybe not like everyone. I'm gonna hit the reset button. I'm happy.
Well, I
He's
don't know.
got
But
some things he's got to improve on. He's a grown up. Maybe he'll realize it. Listen, he came out and said that Keith Carter is working on himself because he doesn't do a good job of speaking to the players and he's going to try to learn how to communicate better. I'm sure Robert Saleh's looking in the mirror and saying, what can I do better? And maybe he'll improve on those things. I'm not going to spend all offseason mad at the guy. Now, if we see all the same stuff early in the year, it's not going to take much to set me off. Not that anybody cares. Like Robert
sure.
Saleh's losing sleep over what Glenn thinks. I'm just thinking out loud here. Yeah, I'm Robert Saleh. Hit the reset button. Delete Joe Beningo's goddamn phone number, and all's forgiven. Just stop hanging out with Joe Beningo.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of talk throughout the course of the year about his in-game coaching if it comes back to bite them, because I have been talking about this, that it really hasn't mattered because they haven't had the quarterback, and I think there are some things that he does that could cost this team actual games when they have decent quarterback play. So other than that, I mean, the moment the games start, Glenn, you know this. I'm gonna take the analyst hat off on Sundays and
and
put
he's just assured us he's learned from his
oh,
mistakes, Chris.
then we're good, Robert. We're good.
Glad to hear it, Coach.
I'm going to take the analyst hat off when the games start and put the fan hat on, and I'll be going crazy. And then when we do the pod, we'll break it all down. But when the games start, I'm going to be the biggest Robert Saleh supporter there is, because
Absolutely.
rooting against Robert Saleh would be rooting against the New York Jets in 2024.
Yeah.
And at that point, what are you doing? Like, why bother?
Yeah, I would never root against the guy. That's the thing that gets lost sometimes when we criticize. And I rarely, I say what I see. I try not to go over the top with criticizing players. But if I do, it's never like I'm rooting against the players, because
Sure.
what the hell is the point then? Like, other than, when Braden Mann makes a tackle that costs you Trevor Lawrence. But other than that, really, there's no time you want to see one of your own players fail. You want to see him do well. You want to see everyone. Dylan should be back with us tomorrow night. He had he was short of internet access this evening. Apparently, there was some issues with his internet.
Now he did say that no matter what, he's going to be on the show tomorrow. He said he doesn't care.
Even if he has to use 85 gigs of data to go live from his phone. So we'll see. But Dylan will be here. We'll be here. I might, day one, not so much. I'm going to do some stuff with Play Like a Jet, but I have multiple monitors running, so I'll probably hop at it. And that's the thing. Like you said, Chris, we're hanging out. Like, if one of us needs a few minutes,
sure, yeah, well,
pop out of the chat and go use the bat, whatever. Go, breathe for a few minutes.
I mean, I probably will just be sitting in the chair, just like staring at the draft, because this is what we live for. So I'll probably be locked in. But yeah, during the commercial break, when there's like 8 minutes, I might sneak a bathroom break in.
I want to watch this Belichick with McAfee. Have you seen this?
So I heard that I heard that on Pat McAfee's draft extravaganza that Bill Belichick is going to be there. I'm probably just going to stick to the regular feed. And
but have you heard how they're going to do it?
No, I have not.
They're going to do it from, like, Belichick is going to set up a war room as it would be in his war room and walk you through the process of everything that everone's doing.
That might now be on one of the
scenarios. Like, here's what this team is thinking right now. And the thing that amazes me about Belichick is the recall. When you can sit down, You just see him in an interview, like, oh yeah, that's like, oh, that's the time we drafted this guy in the fourth round, 1993. We thought his 40 time was, and it's like he just everything he's ever done is like instant access.
Right.
So I think that'll be fun. I think that'll be a lot of fun. I'd like to check that out. But
That might be something. It's gonna be on Pat
I would
McAfee's YouTube,
imagine
right?
YouTube.
So
So
if it's
probably
if
go
it's on
back and
his
watch it
YouTube,
after.
yeah, that's a next day
Yeah,
thing where in the morning I'll be like, okay, now I can just skip through and listen to the analysis on that.
yeah.
That'll be fun.
That's I had that. It was up earlier. I had McAfee on. They were talking about it, and I thought I'm not going to be able to properly focus on it while we're doing our thing. So since it's YouTube, I might watch it the next day.
Yeah.
Something like that. All right. Well, that'll
One more
wrap this
sleep.
one up. We
One
are
more sleep.
what time? What time does the draft start? What time's first pick?
Less than 24 hours away, Glenn.
Fantastic. All right. So less than 24 hours from the start of the 2024 NFL draft, and the New York Jets will be on the clock. Maybe earlier than we expect, maybe later. We'll know when it happens. We'll be here to talk through it, and have a good one, Jets fans.